important water quality webinar. My name's Ed Maltby, and I'm chair of the Devon Maritime Forum, and also Emeritus Professor in Wetland Science, Water and Ecosystem Management. We've got a busy schedule, so I will press on. This webinar is going to be recorded and posted on the Southwest Marine Ecosystems YouTube channel. And I wonder if everyone would mind muting and actually turning off your cameras to minimize the extraneous material that we have. Let me just say a couple of words about the Devon Maritime Forum for those that may not be familiar. It's an independent partnership with a unique role, bringing together the broad and diverse range of organisations and individuals who have a stake or interest in marine and coastal issues in Devon and the wider Southwest Peninsula. We were formed in 2005 with a view to guiding and coordinating cross-sectoral cooperation and to act as a point of contact for all maritime sectors, promoting understanding, sharing challenges and building consensus. We operate as a champion of the sea, encouraging engagement with a wide range of issues and raising the profile of marine and maritime concerns. We also provide a range of services that improve integration and facilitate communication between our network of marine and coastal stakeholders, promoting debate and working collectively towards sustainability on our coasts and seas. The topic today is water quality, and maybe it's useful to know that my own sort of research background has focused on the role of wetlands in managing water quality. And perhaps one milestone has been my engagement as a scientific advisor to the United States Federal Department of Justice on the quite famous Everglades lawsuit, in which the sugarcane farmers and the South Florida Water Management District were sued for the ecological harm that they were causing to the sensitive Everglades ecosystems. If ever there's been an example of the economic and legal significance of this, it is in this case where in the last 20 years or so, about $2 billion has been spent on remedial actions to try and maintain the water quality necessary for the maintenance of the Everglades ecosystems. So we're going to have quite a full agenda, as I said. Questions will be taken during the allocated question time at the end. And in order to keep to time, we are asking that all questions be submitted through the chat function. This can be done throughout the event. Steph will monitor the questions and will direct them to the speakers during the allocated question time. We've got a lot of attendees today, so we won't invite you to speak unless we need clarification on your posted question. Any questions that can't be answered can be noted and they'll be directed to the relevant person or organisation afterwards. I hope we can keep this rather contentious issue in a very courteous style to the speakers. I know there may be a few issues that will ruffle feathers, but let's try and conduct ourselves with appropriate decorum. So you can see the agenda, and I will now ask Steph, as the Devon Maritime Forum coordinator, to pick up, and she is ably assisted by Anna Reichert and Eleanor Ward, who has just recently joined the team. So Steph, I can pass over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ed. Hi everyone. So we at the Devon Maritime Forum, we understand the continuing urgency to address water quality issues. And with a variety of influences over our water quality, it's imperative that we ensure that we work together to formulate solutions. With two coastlines, water quality is crucial to life in the southwest. Poor water quality affects people, wildlife, and has direct negative consequences for the local economy, especially for things like tourism and fisheries. So the water quality work that Devon Maritime Forum are undertaking
Apologies, there was another Teams link.
Hi there. I don't know when I dropped out. Can you hear me okay now? Yeah, great. So I was just saying the water quality work that Devon Maritime Forum are undertaking comes under the umbrella of the Southwest Marine Ecosystems, which is a communicating platform for environmental reporting over the last year for the region. And the key aim of the Southwest Marine Ecosystems is to produce an annual report on the state of the Southwest coasts and seas, and to bring together organisations, networks and individuals who are involved in research, management and recovery of the marine environment. And in addition to the report, each year Southwest Marine Ecosystems provides a communications platform, which include these webinars, producing them on the YouTube channel, an annual conference and wider publicity that enables us to share changes that have been recorded. So we have hosted, as in the Devon Maritime Forum, has hosted a number of these webinars now. Last year's webinar explored the state of the water quality again, looking at evidence, climate change effects, how catchments have changed, data monitoring, combined sewer overflows and citizen science. The aim of this year's webinar is to report on observations and changes in water quality over the past year. So the webinar is going to begin with a focus on how water quality in our rivers have evolved over the last year, including information about available data, changes in monitoring and citizen science, to help build a picture about the state of our rivers and therefore our seas. There'll also be a case study from the Dart and Tavy River Bathing Waters pilot that will be presented. Okay, and that's it for me. I'm going to pass back to Ed, please. You're muted, Ed. There should be a little mic symbol. I think everyone was muted at one point. It should be at the top next to the red leave icon. I can't seem to unmute you, unfortunately. Anna, have you got the ability to unmute anyone?
No, I can't, unfortunately.
Is there a little mic icon in the top for you, Ed? If not, maybe if it's not working, maybe leave and re-enter the meeting.
There.
That's
Got it?
Yes.
You had to do something dramatic. Okay, apologies for that. Can I welcome Nicola Rogers from the Westcountry Rivers Trust, who will kick us off with her presentation. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah,
yes.
Great. I'm just going to share my slides. Can everybody see those?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicola Rogers from Westcountry Rivers Trust, where I'm the Evidence and Engagement Programme Manager, particularly with a focus on data and evidence. Thank you very much to the South West Maritime Forum for the invitation to speak today, and I'll be talking a little bit about how we monitor our catchments, our freshwater catchments, and what's changed in terms of monitoring and engagement over the last year or so. So first of all, I'd probably start by saying not a great deal has changed in terms of the health of our rivers and catchments. This was highlighted recently by the Rivers Trust 2024 State of Our Rivers report. This really took a lot of the EA data from the last reporting period, which was 2019 to 2022, and shaped that into a report. And we can see that the overall health of the rivers in the UK is really not great, and with no river reaching a good status of overall health. And we can also see that the ecological health status of our rivers is in general quite poor too, with only about 15% of rivers achieving good ecological health. The reason primarily for the difference between those two is around the way that persistent organic chemicals or chemicals have been monitored in recent years. And we know that no river in the UK reaches good chemical status. What we do know that's changed over the last year is that people's interest and the media interest in rivers, and this has promoted a huge amount of community engagement around our rivers and waterways. There's been media interest right across the sphere, so from local papers, the broadsheets, many of the broadsheets, the BBC News and the Red Tops, all reporting on the state of our rivers and waterways. A lot of this has been focused around sewage pollution, which is of interest to communities, and it has promoted a lot of great engagement with the health of our rivers. But it's really important to note that sewage pollution isn't the only pollutant facing our waterways. And the rest of my talk, I'm going to focus more on the diffuse pollution and the work that we do at the Westcountry Rivers Trust to address that. So in the rural environment, we primarily see pollution from diffuse sources, and this is very largely due to agricultural sources, which were highlighted as a significant source of pollution in the Rivers Trust 2024 report. So just to highlight a couple of things here, things like compacted soils. They don't store water very well, which means they enhance runoff straight into our rivers and waterways, and that water tends to enter the rivers quickly and in a very poor and polluted state, whereas a healthy soil will hold more water and the water will enter more slowly and in a cleaner state. So we also see pollution from slurry spreading, pesticide application, which obviously gets into the waterways, as well as fertiliser application. And we see things like cattle poaching, which again put things like bacteria and veterinary pharmaceuticals into our waterways. From a rural perspective, we tend to see more point source pollution. Road runoff can be point source or diffuse, depending on how it happens, but that is becoming an increasing matter of concern for many of our West Country communities. I've already mentioned sewage discharges and overflows. We see pollution from industrial discharges, and in the marine environment, that might also include large ships that are around in the marine environment, clearly. Litter and plastic pollution, I'll mention a bit more about in a second. And there are a couple of other pressures on our waterways from the urban side that I'd like to mention. One is overdevelopment, where not enough, obviously we do need housing. We are in a bit of a housing crisis, but if developments happen without enough regard to the environment, that can cause runoff and significant water pollution. And the other thing that I'd really like to mention here is increasing demand. We're using about 60% more water than our grandparents did. That produces a huge stress on our water resources, both in terms of abstraction and treating that waste from that additional water we use. So something for us all to think about there, I think. A little bit about emerging pollutants and things that have been coming to the fore, not just over the last year, but in recent years. I already mentioned plastics, microplastics and litter. And, you know, society in general is responsible for much of this. This research into sort of microplastics and particulate pollution has really gained traction over the last decade or so, perhaps the last 15 to years or so, and microplastics in particular over about the last 10 years. Something that I'm particularly interested in is the huge surface area that microplastics and nanoparticles put into our waterways, because those can cause perturbations to the way that toxicants and pollutants are transported through our waters that we don't really understand yet. So that's one to watch. And another area that I think is emerging are trace organic pollutants. We've known about these for a long time, but our ability to measure these is becoming more and more sophisticated. Currently at Westcountry, we have the capacity to sample for many of these chemicals, but we need to partner with different organisations in order to really analyse them. And we are looking for partnerships with state-of-the-art laboratory facilities and mass spec so we can understand more about those persistent organic pollutants. Another thing to mention here is, of course, chemical cocktails, because persistent pollutants can interact with each other, and often the effects of chemical cocktails are greater than what we might predict from just studying these chemicals in isolation. A little bit about climate and water resources, as Steph mentioned earlier. This is some work that was done for Westcountry Rivers Trust by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research as part of the European Transformer project. And it really predicted that although we are going to see increases in temperatures, that will produce hotter summers rather than milder winters, which will result in increased drought. And our wetter winters will, of course, and drier summers so we'll also add to the prevalence of flood. We know these things already, but the modelling does seem to be pushing that forward too. Drought, obviously, I talked earlier about compacted soils and dry soils not holding water, and flooding obviously brings pollutants and particulates into our rivers and catchments. In terms of the water quality monitoring that WRT do to address some of these issues, I was just going to give a quick rundown of the kind of tier 2, essentially, monitoring that WRT do. We use field-based techniques rather than water sampling and laboratory analysis. We sample for a range of pollutants that are really pertinent to the agricultural pollution that we see in our area. Things like, obviously, nutrients and dissolved oxygen drive eutrophication, dissolved oxygen, reductions in dissolved oxygen are a result of eutrophication. But we also look at things like electrical conductivity, which tells us about dissolved solids coming from roads, pH, tryptophan can tell us about bacterial contamination, and we monitor many of our catchments for these on a regular basis. We also have a number of continuous monitors like the Aquatrol 600, which can measure a range of parameters depending on how we specify it, continuously over time, taking measurements anything from 15 minutes to half an hour continuously over multiple years, which produces a lot of data on what's going on in our catchments. We summarise this data largely visually. And if we have about 6 surveys, 6 different sites, we can start to over a catchment, we can start to produce these catchment scorecards, essentially. And these enable us to look at the different ways that the contaminants are interacting in our catchments and prioritise different areas and water bodies for our interventions. And this is a way we use this technique a lot to enable us to prioritise some of the interventions that we might deliver. A little bit about those interventions and nature-based solutions. This is from the Upstream Thinking Project, which is a project that's been going for about 15 years. It's a collaboration between South West Water with the University of Exeter and other delivery agencies such as ourselves at Westcountry and also DWT and the South West Peatland Partnership, amongst others. And really what we're trying to do is monitor our catchments and identify areas where we can put in place nature-based solutions. Managing the drinking water catchments in this way is cost effective from a water company utilities perspective, because it obviously the cleaner the water that's abstracted, the lower the cost of processing that water for drinking, and that has both an economic and a carbon benefit. So we put in things like lots of fencing to keep cattle out of rivers. We look at slurry store slurry store maintenance with farmers to keep that slurry out of our waterways, soil health, and putting in things like ponds to store water. So those are just some examples of the nature-based solutions we might put in response to some of the monitoring that we do. I wanted to talk a little bit about external sources of data and evidence here, particularly focusing on some of the EA data that drives a lot of the monitoring reports that we see. I wanted to draw attention to the DEFRA Data Services platform and the app gallery there. This is publicly available data that people can use to understand more about their catchments. You can interrogate this looking at the Catchment Data Explorer, and you can click through these links to discover more about your particular waterway and catchment. And also another thing I wanted to highlight from this, so our EA colleagues have done a lot of work on the SWME, where you can find information about bathing waters. So those are open sources of data from DEFRA, which anybody can use to find out more about their rivers. They do sometimes require quite a lot of knowledge until you get used to using this kind of data, so these data platforms from DEFRA. And so the Rivers Trust have done a bit of a summary and created some interactive maps where you can click on, this expands out, and you can click on the waterways in your area, and a little summary will pop up of the available EA and DEFRA data for that particular waterway. So I'd really, really recommend going to have a look at the Rivers Trust State of Our Rivers report for 2024, because there's lots of great interactive maps there. This one really summarises ecological health, but there are also maps for sewage pollution and for persistent chemicals, amongst others. Excuse me. So much of that data in the Rivers Trust report summarises some of the EA sampling data. The EA have been sampling for many, many years, and what we have seen at Westcountry and observed at Westcountry is a decline in the number of samples that the EA have been able to produce. We've recently updated this data because we saw a sharp decline to 2020, and there was a very clear trend there. But we wanted to update this to see what the impacts of the pandemic might be. And as predicted, we have now seen quite a significant increase in the numbers of samples that the EA are able to get out into the catchments and take. There's still quite a small proportion compared to the data in 2020 that's on the far left-hand side of this graph. So there are still some gaps there, and this is also reflected in the number of survey sites that the EA are able to get to, as well as the number of samples that they take. Part of this is driven by a different approach at the EA, where they're focusing much more of their sampling in priority areas rather than sampling widely. But this means that there is a data gap, and that data gap often exists on tributaries and streams that feed the main channels. So that is where efforts like citizen science can come into play, where we can fill some of those data gaps with a broad temporal and spatial data set that can be collected by communities and volunteer monitors. So Westcountry set up a scheme in 2016 to start looking at citizen science to fill some of these gaps, particularly on our streams and tributaries. Citizen science is largely an engagement tool because people tend to care about what they know about, and it gives communities a great deal of knowledge about their local waterways. WRT do also use the data to target areas that might be of high priority, and we do have a couple of instances and case studies where we've actually used citizen science to create action on a waterway, particularly on the River Inny, where some pollution there led to action to remediate that particular site. The other thing that happens is when people have collected this data, they can phone in to, and particularly spotting pollution incidents, they can phone into the EA to report that pollution. They can also phone South West Water, and one of those organisations will often come out to investigate. We're also able to create a network of catchment communities who are all invested in and care about their local environment.
5 minutes, Nicola.
Okay, I think I'm probably okay, thanks, Ed. We've had a massive increase in citizen science over the last few years, and it's been absolutely fantastic to see, and the amount of data that we are now able to collect is amazing. And you can see here this is reflected both in the number of surveys and the number of volunteers we've got signed up to our programme. And this has also mean that we are creating a lot more resources for our citizens, the citizen science communities that are working with the Westcountry Rivers Trust. And I'll talk a little bit about our scorecard and data analysis in a second. We really just focus at the Westcountry Citizen Science Investigations on 4 main parameters. That's turbidity, tells us about particulate contamination, total dissolved solids, about dissolved pollution, phosphate, obviously an indicator of nutrient pollution, and temperature. Not a great deal we can do about temperature, but it is really useful to record, particularly in terms of ecological effects and fish populations. We work with communities around providing them with some feedback and data analysis. And we run training so people can use our equipment effectively as possible and get the best quality data they can. And we invite some of our really engaged volunteers to community data workshops to understand more about the data they're collecting. And then we produce annually a scorecard for each catchment that has given us 12 readings in the catchment over that year. We've had to just automate the process of producing these catchment scorecards because we're now producing upwards of 150 of these scorecards each year. That gives communities the data and evidence they need to lobby their local politicians or local community about the concerns they have. It's not simply now local concern, it's a local concern that is underpinned by data and evidence. And that can lead to some real changes and community fundraising. I'm just going to quickly do 2 case studies where communities have taken this approach much further. Just to mention the Kitbrook Restoration Project in the Axe catchment, where they are producing extensive reports and are working with their local catchment partnership, the Triple Axe Project and the National Landscapes to produce a catchment action plan. And this is some data that the Kitbrook Restoration Project have produced for themselves. And finally, I can see some people on the call from the Yelm Estuary to Moor project, so big shout out for the enormous amount of work that's going on there. The Yelm Estuary to Moor project is a bit unusual in that they have actually raised their funding to procure their own water quality monitor, continuous monitor. And this is some recent data analysis we have done with the Yelm Estuary to Moor project. This is taking continuous water quality readings over the course of a year, and the graphs on the right of this slide show that we can highlight particular events that have happened during that time that we wouldn't have been able to pick up just with spot monitoring techniques via the traditional either WRT monitoring or CSI monitoring. And the Yelm Estuary to Moor project are now working with landowners and their industry and their catchment community to look at solutions that might be available to improve the Yelm corridor. Final slide from me. I guess the final summary here is really, so what? So what are we going to do with all of this community data, the data that organisations like WRT produce, and how does that better inform what we know about our rivers? There's a multiple number of projects that are now looking at this, but I just wanted to highlight the National CASCO project, Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative. It's a £7 million project funded by Ofwat, which includes 24 partners in the Southwest. The Southwest demonstrator is South West Water, the University of Exeter, Westcountry Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency. And CASCO overall aims to produce a national framework for data. We don't have at the moment an integrated framework for data in England. So much of the data that we have on our rivers is quite hidden. So Casco aims to produce a framework to daylight and foreground that data. So citizen science data can be incorporated into a model for understanding our waterways. It can really be then used by tier 2 organisations such as WRT to inform their monitoring, and also right up, if we get the right QA and QC standards in place, to statutory bodies such as the EA, Natural England, other DEFRA organisations can use that again to efficiently marshal their resources. So this really, Casco is really looking to produce a joined up approach to an integrated approach to catchment monitoring, and to involve people in decision making and democratise the process and policy making, so that we're all able to influence decisions around the health of our waterways.
Great.
That's it. Done.
Thank you very much indeed, Nicola. As I said, we'll be taking questions at the end of the two presentations. So if I can move us swiftly on to Nick Paling from the Stakeholder Engagement and Collaboration for South West Water to make his contribution now. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Ed. I'll just share my slides. And I've got more slides than Nicola. That won't come as a surprise to any of you who know me. So I'll get started. Hopefully you can see my shared screen.
Yeah, we can see that, Nick.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of some of the work we're doing, looking at protecting water quality, importantly taking what we call our Green First approach. It's not an accident that the picture on the screen is of Trevornance Cove, because Trevornance Cove has obviously emerged as a flagship for an evidence-based water quality assessment and management planning process. The obligatory overview slide. Obviously South West Water's core area, Devon and Cornwall, now with the addition of providing drinking water services in Bristol and Bournemouth, and of course never forgetting, as my background testifies, the Isles of Scilly. So South West Water took over responsibility for drinking water and wastewater services in the Isles of Scilly in 2020 as well, and we mustn't ever forget that very important water resource zone. I work in the natural resources team. I know there are some colleagues who are watching the webinar today, so I thought I'd put this picture in. That is now about half of the natural resources team. The natural resources team, under the stewardship of Carolyn Cadman in the orange jacket there, has a whole programme of investment that it delivers in its own right, and obviously also supports the work underway relating to the environment right across the business. So in natural resources, we have a number of key drivers, areas that focus our work. We have the South West Water Biodiversity Strategy, which was published in autumn last year. We have a key role to play in the Net Zero programme and supporting climate adaptation. We obviously have a key role to play in catchment water quality through upstream thinking and other schemes, and for the 151, possibly 156 bathing waters in the South West Water area. We have an increasingly important role to play in helping build resilient and sustainable water resources in our catchments. And that's an alliance that's, as I say, is increasing and very important. And we also are heavily involved in the Green First approach to the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan delivery and the Storm Overflow Action Plan. Just wanted to point out, we're also seeing a huge increase in the number of investors who are coming to South West Water who are expressing interest in our environmental work, particularly in biodiversity terms. We are, through myself and Carolyn's work, very focused on meeting external stakeholder expectations, delivering beyond the minimum requirements. And we have a statutory role now in helping to deliver nature recovery across the region, and we're heavily involved in that. The focus today, though, is about water quality, obviously, in relation to bathing waters and transitional waters and various other waters. And I want to then talk about Green First a little bit. In fact, I'm going to start with Green First. So this slide summarises our biodiversity strategy and our plan for the next 5-year investment cycle. You can see that we're planning to invest £45 million in nature recovery by 2030. We now have a biodiversity performance commitment, another 300,000 trees. We're nearly at 300,000 trees for this planning round. We're going to be delivering a nature recovery fund this time next year. And we're also heavily involved in the Net Zero by 2030 programme. But the main focus here is Green First. So that's what I'm going to start with. So the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan was published in May last year, setting out our plans of how we're going to transform the way that we manage wastewater over the next 25 years. Obviously, a key part of that has been the storm overflow programme, and obviously the storm overflow action plan has now been published nationally, which you can find online. Of course, there's a huge focus on storm overflow spill reduction, and this is just a slide that summarises what we've got to and what the plans are. So we have reached 100% event duration monitor installation on all of our storm overflow assets. WaterFit programme is ongoing. That's delivering significant reductions in spill numbers on a key top priority number of assets. We've got the Accelerated Delivery Investment Programme, which is focusing on Falmouth and Sidmouth, which will be delivered, initiated by 2025, so next year. And then we've got the next Asset Management Planning Cycle, AMP8, which is 2025 to 2030 Storm Overflow Programme, which is the value you can see, working on the top 283 assets out of 1,342. And then the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan and the SOAP, as we call it, Storm Overflow Action Plan, then set out how we'll reduce spills at all assets to 10 per year by 2040. Having said all of that, that's all happening. But the most important thing from our perspective is that we are now committed to delivering all of that investment, taking a Green First approach. What is Green First? It basically requires engineers and people spending money on assets and managing assets to consider the contribution that green and blue, i.e. nature-based solutions and things like sustainable drainage solutions, can make to fixing those water management problems first, before reverting to considering grey traditional engineered solutions. And the aim of Green First is to try and find a blend of green, blue and grey solutions as we fix each of the assets that we're working on. And obviously that will deliver the water management targets that we have to deliver, but also hopefully deliver a huge array of additional benefits that green and blue solutions can deliver. We've got a project at the moment where we're doing a lot of thinking about what Green First is and how it works. We're adapting what we call our end-to-end process, which is the process we use to deliver investments into asset management. As I said, we're aiming to develop blended solutions at each location, and we're on a very steep learning curve this year to try and work out how to make this work. A lot of focus on barriers and enablers at the moment. We're having to transform the governance, policy and the financing of investments in asset management, because traditionally that's not something we've done, taking a Green First approach. A lot of work looking at supply chain, delivery partners, capabilities, all sorts of other things. But the real focus from my perspective has always been on providing the data and evidence we need in order to deliver an informed programme. So specifically in that space, we've got two main areas of activity that I'm involved in. One is that we have initiated a programme of natural catchment management plans, which we're piloting in, where it says 15 on this slide, but I can tell you with the addition of Limpstone and countless others, we're now rapidly moving towards 20 pilot catchments. So we're having to take a phased approach. You can see the distribution here on the screen. Very different catchments, very different situations, very different levels of complexity in terms of water quality. But this is a project that we're now up and running. And St Agnes actually and Plymouth are our two front runners, closely followed by the Dart and the SID and other groups where we've already had meetings and engagement, and we're starting to develop the plans in collaboration with local stakeholders. So the key thing about natural catchment management plans is building up our understanding and the evidence, which we absolutely need in order to deliver the investment that we need to deliver to get the outcomes that we so desperately need in terms of water quality. So the other project I'm now going to focus on is the Dart and Tavy and bathing water pilot. So this is funded under the Ofwat's Green Recovery initiative after the pandemic. It was identified about 4 years ago how important inland recreational access to rivers, the water environment and nature, and how important that was to our economy and the health and well-being of our local communities. And so this project was initiated to try and work out how we as a company and as a group of organisations working in partnership could align river water quality approach with the coastal bathing water approach. And we secured funding under the Green Recovery Fund to pilot this in the Dart and Tavy. The Dart and Tavy project essentially breaks down to 3 main strands with a huge amount of investigation, which I'll come on to, a big engagement and collaboration programme, looking at all the things that Nicola talked about and others, education and other data sharing and other factors. And also there was some budget to design and deliver some asset enhancements to see how Green First would look in an operational sense. So looking at the time, I'm going to rattle through these next 2 bits. I'm going to focus on the water quality investigations just to give you a flavour of what we've done, and then I'm going to take you on a tour of a storm overflow catchment. Of course, we're working with Professor Sean Comber, who was at Plymouth University, is now at Stantec, a consultancy, and he has been working on our monitoring and modelling approach. So basically identifying all the potential sources of bacteria in a catchment, and then designing and delivering, first of all, a bacterial sampling programme. We've taken about 900 spot samples for E. coli and intestinal enterococci over the last 18 months. We've taken 50 samples which have been submitted for microbial source tracking analysis, and we've targeted everything from popular bathing locations, up and down catchments, urban, rural. We've sampled sewage treatment works, effluent, combined sewer overflow, effluent, and so on and so forth. So we've really tried to get a complete comprehensive understanding of what's going on in these catchments. And this is the Dart, and just a snapshot. And I'll share the slides afterwards so you can digest perhaps some more of the detail. But essentially, where UV disinfections on a wastewater treatment works, bacterial levels in the effluent are very low. The estuary is very good generally, water quality wise. The river below Buckfast Lee is variable. Lots of bacteria in agricultural areas. Some significant indications that storm overflows particularly might be causing problems locally, and various other learnings. We've also had water quality sensors out in both catchments, as you can see in the map, and continuously detecting various water quality parameters, as Nicola described, and we're using this to calibrate the modelling work that Sean has done. So Professor Sean Comber has developed a predictive model that takes rainfall data, event duration monitoring data, and water quality sensor data, and works out, tries to predict what the bacterial levels will be in the river, and it's quite accurate. We're waiting for it to be reported and written up, but it's looking quite promising as a useful tool. So bacteria present throughout the catchment, these are what we've found so far. It relates to human population, agricultural intensity. There are exceedances of the bathing water standards fairly everywhere in the catchment, really, in the freshwater part of the catchment, particularly at very low flows. When it rains very heavily in the summer, when the river is low, and obviously when it's raining a lot for a long period of time, and you get a lot of runoff. And the key thing at the bottom there is, for robust compliance of bathing waters on rivers, all of these sources will need to be mitigated. So Ed's about to tell me I've got 5 minutes left, I think. So
you have 5 minutes left now.
Excellent. So for the last bit, I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of what we've done to try and investigate 4 storm overflows in detail. And I'll explain. So hopefully I don't need to explain this to you. We have, in many areas, we have combined sewage systems, which combine sewage with surface water, which is all taken off to the sewage treatment works. A combined storm overflow plays a vital role in protecting houses from flooding, and sewerage flooding in the neighbourhood. They are a pressure release when surface water overwhelms the system. The combined sewage is released passively to the environment to stop it backing up into people's houses. The key thing here is that before we can develop solutions to reduce storm overflow spills, we absolutely need to understand each asset. We need to understand the system that they sit in and the hydrological processes that actually cause them to spill. And this is where we've really been focusing on detailed investigations. This is the Dart estuary and the lower Dart above Totnes. We have these yellow spots are the most popular bathing locations on this section of the Dart. And we focus very much on the freshwater part for this project. This is This is Totnes. This is Dartington, and the focus of our work has been on these 4 storm overflows on the Bidwell Brook in Dartington Village. And we've done a deep dive study to try and work out what makes these storm overflows tick. That's the sewage treatment works catchment shown there, and so you can see that this part of the sewage network connects into Totnes works. There it is zoomed in. I call them perhaps a bit simplistically the Bidwell 4, because they are 4 storm overflows that spill into the Bidwell Brook, and we're investigating them to see how they work and whether they're working right and whether they're working wrong. We obviously have event duration monitoring data. You can see from this, if you look at the right-hand column, in 2023, the 4 storm overflows spilt quite a lot. Schools spilt significantly in the winter. They don't spill that often in the bathing water season, as you can see here, but they do spill a lot, and therefore they desperately need to be sorted out. This is what the event duration monitoring data looks like. So you can see the flow in the sewer, combined sewer, and you can see the threshold above which the storm overflow will be spilling. So the key thing here is understanding what makes storm spills happen. It's surface water getting into the combined system, overwhelming that system and causing that excess water to spill. So again, I can just flash through these, but the storm overflow is X. The school storm overflow is shown there. You can see the red lines of the combined sewer coming down, collecting sewage from across the north part of Dartington, and surface water is getting into this network either correctly or incorrectly and causing the storm overflow to spill. That's what it looks like. It's a concrete box. The machine on the top is a pneumatic scraper which scrapes the screens. So there's a 5mm screen on the top of it which stops anything larger than a pea getting into the environment. We've done a lot of investigation looking at impermeable surfaces. We have to understand where the surface water is running off roads and buildings and roofs, and working out how it gets into the network. We have field officers who go out and lift every single manhole and look at every single connection and try and work, and they do CCTV surveys. And what they find is that this is in a situation where it's not raining, and as you can see on the video, hopefully, this combined sewer is running with clear water. That is just clear, fresh water. So there's almost no foul material in that at all. What we see when it rains a lot is that these systems just fill up with rainwater, and that causes the storm overflow to spill. So that's obviously not right, and we desperately need to fix that.
Just 2 minutes, Nick.
Excellent. We have a model which allows us to predict how much water we actually need to take out of the combined system. As you can see, by 2050, we're predicting for these 4 storm overflows that we'll need to store or remove about 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water from these catchments to stop the storm overflows from spilling more than 10 times and once in the bathing season. So quite a big challenge. And as you can see, that's why Green First is so important. So just to finish then, the next thing we do is, once we've worked out what's wrong with them and why they're spilling too much, we can then start thinking about solutions. Surface water separation, sustainable drainage, rainwater harvesting, the whole right the way through. We can design and tailor specific interventions that stop that surface water in large volumes getting into the combined sewer and causing it to spill. So we have a great big toolbox of amazing solutions, from SUDS, wetlands, permeable paving, and then more traditional grey solutions like big storage tanks, which have huge carbon footprints but do the job really quickly, right the way through to relining pipes, relaying bigger sewers, and so on and so forth. And just to finish then, the other thing is we can't forget, and this is where Casco, the project that Nicola described, comes back in. We can't forget that the rural landscape is also having an impact on the drainage network. And so we've also brought upstream thinking catchment management into the Bidwell Brook, and we're working with the Bidwell Brook Partnership to try and work out where rural runoff is interacting with our drainage network and enhancing those problems in terms of storm overflows, spilling. So it's a complex set of solutions, but green first means that we have to include green, blue and grey solutions in order to be successful in hitting these spill reduction targets. And that,
good.
How was that
Okay.
timing wise?
That is perfect. Thank you very much,
That is
Nick.
a miracle.
So I'm going to pass quickly back to Steph, who is going to talk about the poll.
Yep, thank you, Ed. Okay, so we have a poll with 3 questions here, and this is to capture your current perspective on the biggest threats to water quality. So hopefully you'll find it easy to use. If the poll doesn't work for you for any reason, please do put your response into the chat so we can capture it that way. So there's a series of questions that we want you to rank to indicate what, from a list of options, you think are the most significant with regards to water quality. You can drag the options into your order of priority, and we'll give you about a minute for each question. So if I can ask Anna to share the first question, please. So this will pop up and you should all be able to respond directly to the box that you should see in front of you. So the first question is, in your opinion, which pollution sources have the greatest impact currently on our rivers and waterways? So please rank the following from 1, from most important, to 7, which has the least impact. So we have urban development, road runoff, agriculture and horticulture, so rural sources, industry, which is urban and marine sources, wastewater management from water companies, wastewater management from private sources, and domestic waste, including litter and plastics. So please just move those options up or down with the most impact at the top to the least impact at the bottom. And I'll just give you a little time to do that. If you need any clarification on any of this, please put your hand up.
If you can't, Steph, if you can't see them, how do we respond to them?
If you open up your chat box, can you see it that way?
I couldn't see it a minute ago.
It might have popped up now within the chats. See it there? There should be a view poll option.
No,
I can't see it either.
You can't see it either?
Oh, hang on. I can see. Okay. No, it says item unavailable. I can see the first question saying rank it 1 to 7, and then it says view poll, but you can't see it.
Okay, so you can see the question, yeah? I'll just put the options in the chat.
No, I can't see. No, I can't see the questions.
Oh, you can't see the questions.
All I can see is rank it 1 to 7, but I can't see the questions.
Okay, I'll pop the question into the chat.
Okay, thanks.
And then I'll put the options underneath.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to say, Steph, I think it's important to get the polls done, but if we do run out of time, then please, everyone be reassured that I will capture any questions that are in the chat and try and provide responses to those. So just in case we do run out of time with the polls, Steph.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
I can do that as well, Steph.
Yeah, it's quite cumbersome to actually try and do this in the time you've got. So I'm just taking a screenshot and then I'll answer the questions separately.
Okay, let's if those of you who can actually respond to the poll respond, and then if others can't, then I'll email everyone with the questions and you can respond that way. It's just to kind of get a snapshot of an idea.
No, that's great. Thanks, Steph.
Okay, brilliant. Right, so
got 52, so it's good.
Okay, great. So shall we close that poll? I'll let you do the 3 different questions for those that can access that, and then we'll take a look at them at the end. If you want to put up the next one, please, Anna. So this one is In your opinion, what will be the greatest pressures on our water resources? So I'd like you to rank the following from 1, which is the greatest pressure, to 7, which is the least pressure. We have climate change from flooding, climate change drought, population growth, urban development, agricultural profitability, demand in brackets, and consumer expectations, brackets demand, and regulatory changes.
Well, this isn't working.
Not working, that's okay. I'll send you the questions by email afterwards so you can all get a chance to respond. How's everyone going with that? We've got 40 at the moment. So I'll just get a few more seconds. Okay, is everyone able to submit? That would be great. Last few just coming in. Okay, if we're done with that one, can we move on to the last question, please, Anna? Okay, the last question. In your opinion, what are the key enablers and solutions to improve UK water quality and river health? Please rank the following from 1, which has the greatest benefit, to 7, which has the least benefit. So we have governance, policy and funding, data and evidence, integrated approaches, community action, and then we have 3 lots of innovative solutions, first being engineering, then tech/hybrid, and green-blue infrastructure. So someone's put in the chat, so Liz Atwood has put in the chat, UK population is not increasing at this time. Are you referring to immigration? Does anyone want to expand on that, Nick or Nicola?
Was that in relation to increasing demand? I don't know.
Was it population growth? I think it was in the last poll.
So UK population might not be increasing, but we've seen we are forecast to see significant growth in terms of population in the southwest over the next 25 plus years. We're also seeing changes in the way that people use water, for example, so its growth is in the broad sense applied to our region, I would say. So internal migration is going to be one of the biggest, is predicted to be one of the biggest impacts of climate change, as we see people starting to move around within the country. So, and we're already, after the pandemic, we saw a significant amount of internal migration as people redistributed themselves around the country. So the most important thing for water resources management and water quality management in the southwest is the growth in the region.
Thanks, Nick. Very helpful. Okay, everyone happy and have submitted? Last few seconds, if you can submit them, please. Last 3 seconds, and then Anna, if we could take a look at the results, that'd be great. Okay, so should we take a look at the first one? So this is which pollution sources have the greatest impact currently on our rivers and waterways? Okay, so if we close that one, if we take a look, if you're able to scroll up, I don't think Anna can share to everyone. If we're able to scroll up in the chat, you can actually view the output of that poll. And I'll just, for those that can't see it, I'll just go through it. So they currently have the greatest impact. Number 1, agriculture and horticulture, which is actually one of the main impacts I feel on there from the evidence that we have. Second, we've got wastewater management through water companies, and third, urban development. So if anyone has any questions or comments relating to this, to each of these poll results, please do pop your hand up or put the question in the chat. If any of the speakers have any comments on any of these poll results, please do speak up. This will feed into the annual report that I was speaking about. I'm just scrolling down. Okay, and then the second, which is, in your opinion, what would be the greatest pressure on our water source resources? And I'll just quickly open that, and that is, so we've got climate change through drought, population growth, and climate change with flooding. So climate change is obviously one of the greatest pressures that people are feeling on our water resources. Anyone have any comments on those or any questions? Where does the road runoff rank? I will share these, the full outputs from this by email, so you can take a look at those. We're running out of time a little bit. We'll just have a quick look at the third poll. And this is, what are the key enablers and solutions to improve water quality in the UK? Number 1, governance, policy and funding. Number 2, data and evidence. And number 3, innovative solutions through green, blue infrastructure. So, really interesting results. Thank you so much for taking part in that. I know we're running over a little bit, but it would be good if we could just take maybe a few questions, do you think, Ed?
Yeah, if we can just be selective and pick out any that overlap, maybe we have time for one to each of the two speakers.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got one maybe towards Nicola from Lympstone Water Quality Group. So Nicola talked about creating a joined up approach to decision making that affected our drivers. What changes would the speakers recommend to the planning system to protect and improve water quality, and how could this be achieved?
Good question.
Thanks for the question. I think there are, so WRT don't in the main get hugely involved in the planning process because that's a statutory process, but nevertheless there's probably a few examples that we could use. I think one of the big things that we see around planning is the nutrient neutrality moratoria that are currently in place. We've got a few in the southwest, notably in the Axe and the Camel, where there are areas of SSSIs or special areas of conservation, which at the moment have a moratorium on planning until either developers or indeed just people wanting to extend their properties. You have to show that your development will have no impact on the waterways in those particularly protected catchments. So we do see some ways that data and evidence can drive planning decisions. Nick, you might know better than me, but at the moment I know that the water companies, I think, are consultees on the planning process, but they don't actually have a role in the governance of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we are statutory consultees in the planning process, but it's constrained in two ways. Only if the planner thinks that there's a significant water management issue, in which case we won't be consulted if they don't. So it comes down to the judgment of the planner in question. And also when duty to connect came in, which I think was in 2010, obviously that constrained significantly the influence that we have over the planning process, because we have a duty to provide drinking water and wastewater services to new developments. and we're not allowed to be seen as putting a brake on local development and growth. So we have to. It's a bit of a political situation, but we are lobbying hard to become more. For that to be relaxed and for us to be able to be more involved in the planning process locally, but it's higher up the chain, I'm afraid.
Okay, maybe another couple of questions. So one to Nick from Ian Townsend. So Nick, you mentioned that South West Water now have 100% event duration monitoring in place, but is it currently possible to measure actual volumes discharged to reveal the extent of dilution?
So yes, good point. When it was decided that event duration monitors should be the way to go, and everyone had to put event duration monitors on storm overflows, perhaps they didn't ask people who were most interested in water quality, because spill numbers and spill frequency don't really tell you anything of any much use about water quality impacts on water quality, which is part of the problem we're in at the moment. However, there's a huge amount of work going on, so you can there's some state-of-the-art analytics being done. If you can analyze event duration monitoring, and we also have level and flow sensors throughout the network, and so you can actually do some very careful analytics, advanced analytics, to actually identify and model how much water and material, wet sewage, is likely to be coming out of a storm overflow. And that is, we're also doing, under the Dark Tavy project, we've been actually monitoring flow and concentrations of what's coming out of storm overflows. So we're gradually building up a picture that will get us to a point where we can actually model or measure the actual amount of water that's being spilt and try and estimate, because it's not just that, because as I showed, in some situations just rainwater is coming out of the storm overflow. In other situations that it's actually quite enriched with sewage, in which case the water quality is really poor in what's being spilt, and so obviously there's a huge difference. So a swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool's worth of rainwater isn't going to have any ecological impact. An Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is half rainwater and half sewage, obviously is. So we're really keen to try and get a handle on that, because event duration monitors only give you a tiny part of the story. And hi, Ian, how are you?
Thank you, Nick.
Can I suggest one final question, Steph?
One final question. Okay, there's some really good questions here, so we will try our best to have them answered and send them round. Maybe one about agricultural diffuse pollution from Jan Metcalf. Seems to be the elephant in the room, and the Environment Agency has told her that they don't have the funding to address rural pollution. We do have some representatives from the Environment Agency on the call. I don't know if any of you are placed well to help answer. Oh, we have Rob Price here, which is great. If you could.
Yeah, hi, Steph, thanks for the question, Jan. Interested who in the Environment Agency told you sort of that, because the catchment sensitive farming programme is one of our most long-standing programmes that is targeting the agricultural sector in those areas where the pressure is the greatest. And I'm really pleased as well to inform everybody that the agricultural regulatory team, which is a part of the organisation that looks at specific farmyards and compliance against something called the SAFO regulations, is very, very active throughout Devon and Cornwall, looking at those particular priority catchments where the impacts of that rural diffuse pollution is not only impacting water quality, but also sort of protected sites and designated sites. So I hope that helps clear that one up a little bit.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Rob.
Great. Thank you, Steph. Clearly, there are a lot more questions, and hopefully they can be responded to by the speakers or organisations in a follow-up. I hope that'll be possible, Steph. It's actually excellent. There's been so much interest in the chat to follow up on what I thought were two very useful presentations, and I'd like to thank both our speakers for that. I mean, what has come out for me in particular has been the importance of volunteers and citizen science in gathering the essential evidence and data that we need to have a proper perspective on the water quality issues that confront us. It's clearly extremely important that we have better and more extensive partnership working that's going to achieve more informed decision making, and I see some good evidence of that. From the point of view of the industry, the green first approach seems to be increasingly enlightened, and I think the importance of nature-based solutions is coming through as being not just ecologically and environmentally significant, but also economically significant. And I think getting this partnership between business and environment and people is going to be the key to moving forward in a very integrated and better coordinated way. So thank you very much for all the contributions from the participants as well as the speakers, and to our excellent secretariat and coordinator and Steph and her colleagues. The content from this webinar is going to feed into the State of the Southwest Seas report for 2023, which reports on observations of species ecology, ecosystems and management for the past year. It'll help inform and influence approaches to tackling water quality issues. Steph will also be reporting at the SWME conference in Plymouth Marine Laboratory on the 26th of April. There are other webinars that have taken place through the Southwest Marine Ecosystem. Steph will be putting the link in the chat. Recordings of previous years' water quality webinars can also be found there. And Steph will also include the link to past SWME annual reports. So I know we've gone over the hour, but I think that's been really worthwhile. And so I'd just like to thank you all for making the time, for your contributions, and hopefully this will help to reinvigorate the interest in the work of the Devon Maritime Forum. So thank you very much indeed, everyone.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Deanne, I'm trying to pick up a few, sorry, see Deanne moving there. Steph, I'm trying to pick up a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, great.
Would you prefer that we did that via email?
Either, whichever you prefer, because I can still get the chats afterwards,
Okay,
so I can put that into.
See what I can. There weren't many, I think, unsurprisingly.